Dominions mocked Earth's call seconds before human warships surrounded them. The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, its walls carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. And Ambassador Kelvrath of the Dominion Assembly sat in his elevated seat with the casual arrogance of a predator who had never known defeat. His 4 eyes scanned the thousands of delegates filling the chamber, representatives from species that had bent their knees to the Dominion centuries ago. And he felt the familiar warmth of superiority spreading through his chest. The Dominion had ruled this quadrant of the galaxy for 12,000 years. And in all that time, no species had ever risen to challenge them. No fleet had ever matched their power, and no civilization had ever refused their demands. Kelvrath remembered the conquests his ancestors had led, the worlds they had burned, the species they had broken. And he smiled with all 3 rows of his needle-sharp teeth. Today's session promised nothing but tedium. Another collection of petitions from minor species, begging for scraps of attention. And Kelvrath had already decided to approve none of them. The High Coordinator, a towering figure named Zethrel, whose scales shimmered like polished obsidian, rose from his central throne and activated the main holographic display. "We've received a petition from a newly spacefaring species," Zethrel announced, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber with practiced authority. "They call themselves humans, and they originate from a small planet called Earth in the outer spiral arm." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, and Kelvrath noticed several delegates checking their data tablets with expressions of confusion. "I have never heard of this species," said the Velkorath delegate, insectoid creature whose mandibles clicked with each word. "How long have they possessed faster-than-light travel?" Zethrel consulted his records and let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "Approximately 80 of their years, which translates to roughly 63 standard galactic cycles." The chamber erupted in laughter, a cacophony of clicks and whistles and roars that shook the crystal walls. And Kelvrath joined in with his own rasping chuckle. 80 years was nothing. Less than nothing, a mere heartbeat in the lifespan of a proper civilization. And these humans dared to approach the council as if they belonged among the stars. "Show us their petition," Kelvrath commanded, waving one of his 4 arms dismissively. "I could use the entertainment." The holographic display flickered, and suddenly a human female appeared before the assembly. Her image projected 30 feet tall so that every delegate could study her strange features. She had only 2 eyes, Kelvrath noted with disgust, and her skin was a peculiar brown color that reminded him of dried mud. And she stood with her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that suggested military training. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," the human said, her voice calm and measured. "I am Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo, representing the United Earth government." She paused, and Kelvrath noticed that her eyes seemed to look directly at him. Though he knew this was impossible, humanity comes before this assembly to request formal recognition as a spacefaring civilization. She continued, "We seek trade rights, diplomatic standing, and the protections afforded to all member species under the Council Charter." More laughter filled the chamber, louder this time, and several delegates did not even bother to hide their contempt. The Velkorath representative leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering with malice. "You have been among the stars for less than a century, and you dare to ask for equal standing with civilizations that have existed for millennia." Ambassador Okonkwo did not flinch, did not look away, did not show any sign of fear or intimidation. And this small defiance irritated Kelvrath more than he wanted to admit. "The Charter makes no distinction based on age," she replied. "It states that any species capable of faster-than-light travel may petition for membership. And humanity meets this requirement." Kelvrath rose from his seat, his massive frame casting a shadow across the holographic display, and he let his contempt drip from every word. The charter was written by the Dominion, he said, and we decide who is worthy of its protections. Not some primitive species that has barely learned to crawl between stars. He stepped closer to the hologram, towering over the image of the human ambassador. And he made sure every delegate could see his dismissal. Your species is young, weak, and insignificant, Kelvrath declared. You have no fleet worth mentioning, no technology worth studying, and no resources worth taking. So consider yourselves fortunate that we do not simply erase your little world from existence. The chamber filled with approving sounds. Delegates nodding and clicking and stomping their appendages in agreement. And Kelvrath basked in their approval, but Ambassador Okonkwo remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that Kelvrath did not understand. I see, she said simply. Then I ask only that this petition be formally recorded, along with your response, so that the historical record remains accurate. Zethral waved his hand dismissively. Your request is noted and denied. Now remove yourself from our presence, before we lose patience with your presumption. The hologram flickered and disappeared, and the chamber returned to its normal business. Delegates discussing trade routes and territorial disputes and all the mundane matters of galactic. Governor Ansiclev settled back into his seat with a satisfied rumble, already forgetting about the strange little species from the outer spiral arm, but deep in the back of his mind, something nagged at him, a tiny whisper of doubt that he could not quite silence. The human ambassador had shown no fear, no anger, no desperation, and that troubled him. Every species that had ever come before the council had begged or threatened or pleaded. But this human had simply asked for her denial to be recorded, as if she had expected nothing else. As if she had wanted nothing else, Kelvrath shook off the feeling and turned his attention to the next petition. But the image of those calm brown eyes stayed with him longer than he liked. He told himself it meant nothing, that humans were simply too primitive to understand the danger they faced. And he pushed the encounter from his mind. He would remember this moment later, when the sky above his homeworld filled with human warships, and he would realize that he had made the worst mistake of his 12,000-year civilization. But for now, he laughed with the rest of the council, secure in his power, blind to the storm that was already gathering in the darkness between stars. The humans had come in peace, and they had been rejected, and now they would come again in a way that the galaxy would never forget. High Coordinator Zethral found the humans amusing at first, the way one might find a small insect amusing as it crawled across a table before being crushed. 3. More petitions arrived in the weeks following that first transmission, each one more detailed than the last, each one citing obscure sections of the council charter that had not been invoked in thousands of years. Zethral had his legal advisors examine the documents, and they reported back with expressions of grudging surprise. The humans have studied our laws extensively, his chief advisor admitted, her scales rippling with discomfort. They have found provisions that we ourselves had forgotten, loopholes and clauses that technically support their requests. Zethral dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. Laws are nothing without power to enforce them, and these humans have no power. So their legal arguments are meaningless. But the petitions kept coming. 5 more, then 7, then 12, each one building upon the last like layers of stone in a fortress wall. And Zethral began to feel something he had not felt in centuries. He felt annoyed the 14th petition arrived on a day when Zethral was already in a foul mood, his morning briefings having revealed problems with rebellious colonies and trade disputes that threatened his political standing. He read the human document with growing irritation, noting how they had now cited 347 separate provisions of galactic law to support their case for membership. Enough, he growled, crushing his data tablet in his powerful grip. These creatures need to learn their place. He summoned Admiral Vashkin, commander of the Dominion's Third Fleet. A veteran warrior who had burned worlds and broken species without hesitation for over 200 years, Voshkin stood at attention before the High Coordinator, his forearms clasped behind his back and his scarred face showing no emotion. "I want you to take a task force to the human colonies," Zethral commanded. "Do not destroy anything, not yet, but make them understand what happens to species that annoy us." Voshkin's mouth twisted into something like a smile. "A show of force, High Coordinator." "Precisely," Zethral replied. "Let them see our ships, let them feel our presence, and let them understand that their petitions will bring them nothing but suffering if they continue." Admiral Voshkin departed within the hour, leading a fleet of 40 warships toward the outer spiral arm where humanity had established its modest collection of colonies. The journey took 3 days at maximum speed, and Voshkin spent the time reviewing what little intelligence the Dominion had gathered about this strange young species. The reports were unimpressive, showing a civilization with only a handful of colony worlds, a small defensive fleet of perhaps 50 vessels, and technology that appeared to be several generations behind Dominion standards primitives. Voshkin muttered to himself as he studied the data. They probably built their ships from salvage parts and stolen designs. His fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of a human colony system, and Voshkin immediately ordered his ships into an aggressive formation, designed to intimidate any watching eyes. The colony world before them was called New Geneva, a blue and green sphere that reminded Voshkin of countless other worlds he had threatened over his long career. He opened the communication channel to the planet below, not bothering to hide the contempt in his voice. "Attention. Human settlement," he announced. "I am Admiral Voshkin of the Dominion Third Fleet, and I bring a message from High Coordinator Zethral." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing. "Your species has been noted, and your petitions have been received, but you must understand your position in this galaxy. You are tolerated guests here, nothing more, and you exist only because we allow it." Voshkin leaned forward in his command chair, his 4 eyes narrowing with menace. "Cease your petitions immediately. Accept your place among the lesser species, and be grateful that we have shown you such mercy. Any further attempts to elevate yourselves will be met with consequences that your young civilization cannot imagine." He ended the transmission and settled back, expecting the usual response from intimidated primitives. Perhaps panicked communications begging for forgiveness, or maybe defiant threats that would give him an excuse to demonstrate Dominion firepower. What he got instead was silence. Minutes stretched on, and Voshkin felt a flicker of uncertainty creep into his mind. "Are they receiving our transmission?" he demanded of his communications officer. "Yes, Admiral," came the reply. "Our signals are being received clearly." "They simply are not responding," Voshkin frowned, his scales rippling with irritation. "Perhaps they are too frightened to speak, or perhaps their primitive systems cannot generate a proper reply." But then, exactly 17 minutes after his transmission, a response finally came. It was not from the colony world below. It was not from any planetary installation or orbital station. It came from somewhere in deep space, somewhere that Voshkin's sensors showed as completely empty. The message was audio only, a human voice that was calm and clear and utterly without fear. "Admiral Voshkin," the voice said. "This is Admiral Chun Wei-Lin of the United Earth Navy. We received your message and the message of High Coordinator Zethral." There was a pause, and when the voice continued, something in its tone made Voshkin's blood run cold. "For 80 years, humanity has sought peace with the Galactic Council. We have followed your laws, respected your customs, and asked only for the recognition that your own charter promises to all spacefaring species." Another pause, longer this time, heavy with meaning. We filed 14 petitions. Each one legal, each one proper, each one rejected with mockery and contempt. And now you come to our colonies with warships, threatening our people, demanding that we accept our place as lesser beings. The voice hardened, becoming something sharp and dangerous. We gave you every chance. Vashkin opened his mouth to respond, to demand an explanation for this strange transmission. But before he could speak, every alarm on his ship began screaming at once. His sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief as she reported what her instruments were showing. "Admiral," she gasped, "ships are appearing all around us. Hundreds of them. They are coming from nowhere. I do not understand how this is possible." Vashkin stared at his tactical display, watching in horror as red icons bloomed across the screen like drops of blood spreading through water. He had brought 40 ships to intimidate these primitives, and now he was surrounded by more than 300 vessels that his sensors had not detected until they wanted to be seen. The human voice came again, and this time there was no mistaking the cold satisfaction in its tone. "Admiral Vashkin, your fleet is surrounded. You have 5 minutes to power down your weapons and surrender your vessels, or we will demonstrate exactly what humanity is capable." Vashkin gripped the arms of his command chair, his claws digging into the metal, and for the first time in 200 years of warfare, he felt genuine fear. The primitives had been hiding. He realized hiding their true strength, hiding their true numbers, hiding everything while the Dominion laughed at their petitions, and now the laughing was over. Admiral Chun Wei-Lin stood on the bridge of the UE's Thermopylae, watching the tactical display with calm brown eyes that had seen decades of preparation lead to this single moment around her. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each officer monitoring their station with the focused intensity of professionals who had trained for years for exactly this scenario. The Thermopylae was the flagship of the United Earth Navy's first strike fleet, a vessel that officially did not exist. Built in secret shipyards, hidden in the asteroid belts and gas giant moons of humanity's territory, Chen remembered the day she had first set foot on this ship. 20 years ago, when she was still a young captain being briefed on humanity's true strategy for survival among the stars. The galaxy operates on one rule, Admiral Morrison had told her, his weathered face grave with the weight of knowledge. The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer. So we must never let them know how strong we really are. For 80 years, humanity had played a role, appearing weak and primitive and harmless, while secretly building a fleet that could challenge any power in the galaxy. They had studied every transmission the Dominion sent, cracked every encryption, learned every secret. And all the while they had smiled and filed petitions and let themselves be mocked. Chan had hated it at first, hated pretending to be less than they were, hated watching her species be dismissed and threatened while they possessed the power to fight back. But she understood now, understood that patience was the deadliest weapon of all. And today that patience would finally pay its dividend. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her executive officer announced. "The Dominion fleet remains in standard formation. They have not detected our approach." Chan nodded, her expression unchanged. "Decloak on my command. All ships maintain formation and await further orders." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders, knowing that what happened in the next few minutes would determine the fate of humanity for generations to come. Decloak now, across the vast emptiness of space. 312 human warships shimmered into existence, their advanced stealth systems powering down to reveal hulls of gleaming dark metal that absorbed light like pools of shadow. The Thermopylae was the largest, a dreadnought-class vessel nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the Dominion had never imagined possible. Around her sat carrier ships loaded with thousands of fighters, destroyer squadrons designed for swift and devastating strikes, and support vessels carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They formed a perfect sphere around the Dominion fleet, positioned so that every escape vector was blocked, every avenue of retreat sealed by overlapping fields of fire. Chen watched the Dominion ships on her display, watching them scramble as their sensors finally registered what was surrounding them. "The Dominion flagship is hailing us, Admiral," her communications officer reported. "Let them wait," Chen replied. "Open a channel to all Dominion vessels." She straightened her uniform and composed her features into a mask of professional detachment before stepping forward. "Attention, Dominion Fleet. This is Admiral Chun Wei-Lin of the United Earth Navy. Your vessels are surrounded by a force that outnumbers you, approximately 8 to 1. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields, your engines cannot outrun our ships, and your communications cannot reach beyond the jamming field. We have established around this engagement zone on the tactical display." Chun could see the Dominion ships trying to move, trying to form defensive positions, trying to find some way out of the trap that had closed around them. "You have 5 minutes to power down your weapons and surrender your vessels," she continued. "If you comply, your crews will be treated with respect and return to Dominion space unharmed." Her voice hardened. "If you do not comply, we will demonstrate exactly why humanity spent 80 years hiding our true capabilities." She ended the transmission and waited, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether this day ended with diplomacy or destruction. Her executive officer stepped closer, speaking quietly so that only she could hear. "Do you think they will surrender, Admiral?" Chun shook her head slowly. "No. The Dominion has not surrendered in 4,000 years. Their pride will not allow it. Not against a species they consider primitive." The 5 minutes passed in tense silence, both fleets hanging motionless in the void while Admiral Vashkin presumably argued with his captains about their options. When the deadline arrived, the answer came not in words but in weapons fire. The Dominion flagship launched a full spread of plasma torpedoes at the Thermopylae, followed immediately by coordinated fire from every ship in their fleet. Chum did not flinch as the weapons streaked toward her vessel, did not even blink as explosions bloomed against her shields and faded into harmless light, shields holding at 98%. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "their weapons are even less effective than we projected." Chum nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction that brought her no joy. "All ships engage at will. Disable their vessels, but minimize casualties. We want prisoners, not corpses." The United Earth Navy moved with the precision of a machine designed for exactly this purpose. Fighter squadrons launched from carrier bays and swept toward the Dominion fleet in coordinated waves, their pilots executing maneuvers that the enemy had never seen and could not. Counter-destroyers darted between the larger ships, their weapons targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical accuracy, while leaving crew compartments intact. The dreadnoughts held their positions, their massive guns firing only when necessary to disable ships that tried to break through the surrounding sphere. Chen watched the battle unfold on her display, watching red icons flicker and fade as ship after ship lost power, their weapons silenced, their engines dead, their crews left floating helplessly in disabled hulls. The Dominion fought back with everything they had, and it was not enough. Not nearly enough. Their plasma torpedoes splashed harmlessly against human shields. Their laser batteries could not penetrate human armor, and their fighters were swept from space by weapons they could not see coming. 9 minutes after the first shot was fired, it was over 40 Dominion warships drifted powerless in the void, their hulls intact but their systems completely disabled, their crews alive but utterly defeated. Admiral Vashkin's flagship was the last to fall, its bridge going dark as human boarding teams cut through the outer hull and began securing the vessel. Deck by deck, John allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. Before turning to her communications officer, signal all ships. Secure the prisoners and prepare for Phase 2. She looked at the tactical display one final time. At the scattered remains of Dominion Pride floating helplessly in the darkness. And have Admiral Voshkin brought to my ready room, she added. I believe we have much to discuss. The first battle was over, but the war for the galaxy's future had only just begun. Admiral Voshkin had never been captured before, had never felt restraints around his 4 wrists, had never been marched through the corridors of an enemy vessel like a common prisoner. Human soldiers who escorted him were smaller than him by half, their soft bodies looking fragile compared to his armored scales. And yet they moved with a confidence that made him deeply uneasy. They did not gloat, did not mock, did not show any of the cruelty that Dominion soldiers would have displayed toward a defeated enemy. They simply did their job with quiet efficiency. And somehow that was worse. The corridors of the human ship were strange to his eyes. The walls smooth and gray instead of the ornate crystal and metal that decorated Dominion vessels. Everything designed for function rather than display. He noticed small details as they walked. Details that his military mind cataloged automatically. The thickness of the bulkheads, the placement of emergency systems, the way every surface seemed to absorb sensor signals rather than reflect them. This ship had been built by people who understood warfare at a fundamental level. People who had thought about every possible scenario and prepared for each on. Voshkin felt his stomach clench with the growing realization of just how badly he had underestimated these creatures. The soldiers brought him to a door that slid open silently, revealing a room that was spare and functional, containing only a table, 2 chairs, and a viewport that looked out upon the wreckage of his fleet. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin stood at the viewport with her hands clasped behind her back, and she did not turn when he entered. Please, sit down, she said, her voice calm and professional. I have arranged for tea, if you would like some. Voshkin stared at her in disbelief. You offer me refreshments after destroying my fleet? Chun turned then, her brown eyes meeting his without any trace of hostility or triumph. I did not destroy your fleet, Admiral. I disabled it. Your ships can be repaired. Your crews are alive. And you yourself are unharmed. She gestured to the chair opposite hers. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. And I would prefer to do so as professionals rather than as enemies. Voshkin hesitated, his pride warring with his curiosity, but eventually he lowered himself into the chair, finding it surprisingly comfortable, despite being designed for a different body type. Chun sat across from him and poured tea into 2 cups, sliding one toward him before taking the other for herself. I am sure you have questions, she said. I will answer what I can. Voshkin's 4 eyes narrowed. How long have you been hiding this fleet? How did you develop technology that surpasses our own? Why did you pretend to be weak? Chun took a sip of her tea, her expression thoughtful. 80 years ago, when humanity first developed faster-than-light travel, we sent probes to observe the galaxy before we ever announced our presence. She set her cup down gently. What we found terrified us. We saw the Dominion conquering worlds. We saw the Council ignoring the pleas of weaker species. We saw a galaxy ruled by force and cruelty, where the strong took whatever they wanted. Her voice remained calm. But Voshkin detected something hard beneath the surface. We knew that, if we revealed ourselves as we truly were, the Dominion would see us as a threat and destroy us before we could defend ourselves. So we made a different choice. She leaned forward slightly. We pretended to be exactly what you expected. Primitive, weak, harmless, just another young species stumbling among the stars. And while you laughed at our petitions, we watched and learned and built. Voshkin felt a chill run down his spine. You were studying us, Every transmission, every battle, every piece of technology you displayed, Chun confirmed. We learned your tactics, your weaknesses, your blind spots. And we designed our fleet specifically to counter everything you could throw at us. She gestured toward the viewport, where more human ships were decloaking, hundreds more. An armada that made Voshkin's breath catch in his throat. You believed you were the hunters, Admiral, but you were never in control of this situation. We chose when to reveal ourselves. We chose where this battle would take place. We chose every detail of this engagement. Voshkin stared at the growing fleet outside the viewport, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. How many ships do you have? He whispered. Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Enough. She stood and walked to the viewport, her small frame silhouetted against the stars. Your dominion has ruled through fear for 12,000 years. You never imagined that a species would willingly appear weak, would endure mockery and threats, would play the fool for 8 decades just to gain an advantage. She turned to face him. That is the difference between us. Admiral, you see patience as weakness. We see it as strength. You conquered because you could. We hid because we had to. But now the hiding is over. Voshkin found his voice. What do you want? Revenge? Territory? Tribute? Chun shook her head slowly. We want what we have always wanted. Recognition, trade, diplomacy, a place among the stars where humanity can exist without the threat of extinction hanging over us. Then why build this fleet? Voshkin demanded. Why prepare for war if you wanted peace? Chun's expression softened slightly, something almost like sympathy crossing her features. Because we learned the most important lesson that your galaxy had to teach us. Admiral, she returned to her seat, meeting his eyes with a gaze that held centuries of human history. Peace without strength is just another word for slavery. We do not want to rule anyone. We do not want to conquer anyone. But we will never again be in a position where our survival depends on the mercy of those who have none. She pushed a data tablet across the table toward him. You will return to the Dominion with a message. Admiral, tell High Coordinator Zethral that humanity is ready to negotiate. Tell him that we seek partnership, not conflict. Her voice hardened. But also tell him what you saw here today. Tell him about the fleet that appeared from nowhere. Tell him about the battle that lasted 9 minutes. Tell him that the next time the Dominion threatens human worlds, we will not be so gentle. Voshkin picked up the tablet with trembling hands, reading the terms of humanity's proposal, terms that were firm but not cruel, demanding but not impossible. And if the Dominion refuses? He asked quietly. Chen finished her tea and set the cup aside. Then we will continue this conversation with High Coordinator Zethral directly. And he will find that I am considerably less patient than our diplomats have been. She stood, signaling that the meeting was over. Your shuttle will be ready within the hour, Admiral. I suggest you use the journey home to think very carefully about the message you will deliver. Voshkin rose slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him, and for the first time in 200 years, he did not know what to say. He had come to intimidate primitives. And instead, he had discovered that his civilization had been outplayed from the very beginning as the human soldiers escorted him away. He found himself wondering how many other secrets humanity was still hiding, and that question frightened him more than anything else. The chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. 4,000 delegates from species across the galaxy sat frozen in their seats, their eyes fixed on the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. And not one of them dared to speak. 3 days had passed since Admiral Voshkane returned to Dominion space with his tale of defeat. 3 days of chaos and disbelief as the most powerful civilization in the quadrant struggled to understand what had happened. High Coordinator Zethral had refused to believe it at first, had accused Voshkin of cowardice and incompetence, had threatened to have him executed for bringing shame upon the Dominion. But then the sensor data arrived. Recordings from the battle that showed 300 human warships appearing from empty space. Recordings that showed Dominion weapons bouncing harmlessly off human shields. Recordings that showed a fleet built in secret over 8 decades of patient deception. And then more reports came in. Reports from across Dominion territory. Reports of human ships appearing at the edges of every major military installation, surrounding them without firing a shot. Simply waiting, the Dominion had built its empire on the belief that strength came from aggression, from striking first and striking hard. But now they faced an enemy who had already surrounded them before they even knew the war had begun. Sithrall had called this emergency session of the Galactic Council, hoping to rally the other species against humanity, hoping to form an alliance that could overwhelm these upstart creatures through sheer numbers. He had expected support, expected outrage, expected the galaxy to unite against this common threat. Instead, he found something he had never seen before in the council chamber. Hope, the smaller species, the ones who had lived under Dominion rule for centuries, watched the holographic display with expressions that mixed fear and fascination, their eyes gleaming with something that might have been the first stirrings of possibility. The display flickered, and suddenly Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo appeared before the assembly. Her image projected 30 feet tall, just as it had been during that first mocked petition. But this time, no one laughed. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a civilization that had finally revealed its true face. "I am Ambassador Okonkwo, and I speak on behalf of the United Earth Government and the United Earth Navy." She paused, letting the silence stretch. 3 days ago, a Dominion fleet came to threaten our colonies. They came to remind us of our place, to teach us that we were weak and they were strong. Her expression remained calm, controlled, professional. That fleet has been returned to Dominion space, its crews unharmed, its ships repairable, and its admiral carrying a message that I hope has been delivered clearly behind her. The holographic display shifted to show tactical data, images of human fleets surrounding every major Dominion military installation across 3 sectors of space. As we speak, the United Earth Navy maintains position around 97 Dominion bases, orbital stations, and fleet anchorages, Okonkwo continued. "We have not fired a single shot since the initial engagement, and we have no intention of firing unless provoked." She clasped her hands behind her back. Humanity did not want this confrontation. For 80 years we pursued peace through legal channels, through petitions and negotiations and appeals to the charter that governs this council. Her voice hardened slightly. We were denied at every turn, mocked for our youth, dismissed for our weakness, and finally threatened with destruction for daring to ask for equal treatment. She took a step forward, her image looming over the assembled delegates. "So let me be absolutely clear about what humanity wants and what humanity is prepared to do." The chamber seemed to hold its breath. "We do not seek territory beyond our own colonies. We do not seek tribute from any species. We do not seek to rule or dominate or conquer anyone." Okonkwo's eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gazes of thousands of delegates. "What we seek is simple. The end of the old way." She gestured broadly. "For 12,000 years, this galaxy has operated on one rule. The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer. Species have been conquered, worlds have been burned, civilizations have been erased, all because power was the only law that mattered." Her voice rose. "That rule ends today." Zethral surged to his feet, his scales rippling with fury. "You cannot simply declare the end of an order that has existed for millennia. You are one species against thousands." Okonkwo turned to face him, and something in her expression made him falter. "High Coordinator, your fleet was defeated in 9 minutes. Your military installations are currently surrounded by forces you cannot match. And your entire civilization is one order away from economic collapse as human ships block your supply lines. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. I am not declaring the end of your order. I am informing you that it has already ended. The only question remaining is what comes next. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Delegates whispering urgently to each other. Species that had been rivals for centuries, suddenly finding common ground in their shared uncertainty raised her hand. And the murmurs faded. Humanity proposes a new covenant for this galaxy. Not rule by force, but cooperation by choice. Any species that wishes to trade with humanity will be welcomed. Any species that wishes to share knowledge and culture will find eager partners. She paused. And any species that threatens another. Any civilization that seeks to conquer or enslave or destroy will find the United Earth Navy appearing at their borders with a simple question. Her voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. Are you certain you want to do this? The smaller species were the first to react. Delegates from worlds that had suffered under dominion, rule for generations rising to their feet with expressions of wonder and relief. Then others joined them. Species who had remained neutral out of fear. Species who had dreamed of a different galaxy, but never believed it possible within minutes. 3/4 of the council chamber was standing, not in protest, but in support. A wave of species declaring their willingness to accept humanity's terms. Ethel watched in horror as his empire's allies abandoned him one by one. As the order he had spent his entire life serving crumbled around him, Okonkwo waited until the chamber had quieted before delivering her final words. The Dominion has a choice to make. You can accept a new order and find a place within it, or you can resist and discover just how thoroughly humanity has prepared for that possibility. She nodded respectfully to the assembly. We will await your decision, but I suggest you make it quickly. The galaxy has already begun to change, and those who refuse to change with it will find themselves left behind. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Kelvrath, who had mocked that first human petition with such contempt, sat motionless in his seat as the truth of his situation settled over him like a shroud. The primitives had won, not through force alone, but through patience and planning and a determination that the Dominion had never imagined possible. And as he looked around at the transformed council chamber, at species finally finding their voices after centuries of silence, he realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought the future with them.